So
Sue, for some reason, I can't hear Nigel.
No. Sorry, I've just realised I turned my
no, you can't do that because yeah. Anyway,
right.
so let me. All right, I'll start yet again. It's like a rehearsal. This. The reason why I did this is because what Stuart was doing was talking from his own personal experience. And for those of us who've done the business presentation, we've generally done it from not so much from that perspective. Certainly in my own case, I've been almost presenting it as it's been a presentation, and I guess that should be in inverted commas. It's a presentation of this is what we do. It's a showcase of what we do, as opposed to this is why I'm doing it. And that's why it's a showcase of what I do. So Stuart taught me a very valuable lesson in relation to it, because one of the things that Zinzino is, it's a lifestyle choice for a lot of us. We've chosen to align ourselves with Zinzino in a way which is going to give us a chance to build something we don't have in order to achieve something we don't have, because it's a landscape within which we can see ourselves achieving it, as opposed to perhaps the one we're already in. So what we see, what I see a lot, and is people who are in their midlife, and they've been successful. They are successful by many measures, very successful, but they're unfulfilled. And they're unfulfilled because there's a disconnect between what's going on, if you like, in their soul, and what's going on in the head, in terms of expectation of society and themselves based on what they've already built. They get caught in this trap of, well, I guess it's the midlife salary trap, where the mortgage gets paid, the kids' school fees get paid, the car payments happen. They've built a lifestyle to be supported by their income. So choices become less so from an economic point of view. So the head then rules the heart. And as we know, that's not the right way round, because the disconnect between the head and the heart is the one that causes the stress. It's probably the most fundamental reason for hypertension and various other stress-related diseases, and the mental health issues that, and I'm generalizing here, and this is my perception, by the way, rather than based on any fact whatsoever, but this is what I've witnessed, is, and people who are unhappy in what they do. And there was a Mintel study that kind of underlined that. 85% of people asked said they weren't particularly happy with the work they did. What's the point of spending a third of your life doing something you're not enjoying? So the reason why I've started to pick on this was to some extent predicated by what Stuart was talking about, which is the personal reasons why he joined Zinzino and what it's delivering for him. And as a showcase for what business offers, it's probably the most powerful one I've ever seen, simply because it became very relatable for people who are in that position. You know, they're looking at where they are and they're saying, am I happy in what I'm doing? And they're really not. And they're looking at the career they've got and looking towards the end of it and saying, well, what happens next? You know, is this my life? And there are lots and lots of people out there who don't see it as their life. So that's where I started to come at from. Now, many of you know that Sue and I I particularly worked extremely closely with John Canary, one of the partners who created the Ball Rich program with he and Bob Proctor. Created that, and I facilitated that program for a very long time here in the UK. And John and we became very good friends, very good personal friends, and he was a mentor of mine and Sue's for many years. And he's an unsung hero in the personal development world in very many ways. And I learned a lot of the stuff I'm going to teach, or I'm beginning to teach you here, from him, because the concepts that I came across when he and we first engaged with each other were, I was in, I guess, my mid-40s at that point. And a lot of them were foreign ideas. They weren't things that you come up against very often. They're much more commonplace now, because the personal development world has moved on hugely in terms of helping people understand what motivates them and what doesn't much more easily and much better than ever before. But he started talking particularly about this disconnect between the conscious and subconscious and the results that we get. But what the conscious mind asks for is what the subconscious delivers. And where the real work's done and the results that we get is not in your thinking, it's actually in your habits and your self-image. So I call this one the winner's image, because essentially what I'm talking about is where you are now. Correction, not you, I'm generalizing here. Where someone is in there right now and where someone would like to be. Because I don't know about you, but the idle moments where you sit and think, well, there's 140 million pounds available on the Euro Millions, I'll buy a ticket. What am I going to spend it on? That sort of idle fantasy moment where you begin to see yourself in a lifestyle that's very different from the one you have, based on money being no object. That's driven by thinking that's deep-seated, probably not thought of as real. That's why I kind of label it as fantasy. But essentially, others are doing it. So it's not really. It's just a question of your concept of yourself doesn't deliver it for yourself. The lottery win would. Now, I've gone through this process myself, so I'm talking from a kind of an experiential place right now in terms of, that fantasy, can it become reality? Well, for some people it has. And it does. Simply because they've become very definite about what they're doing and why they're doing it. For the vast majority of people, that doesn't ever happen. And where it does happen and they become successful, very often it's in roles that if they stop doing them, then that success diminishes, dries up, disappears. Because it's based on skills they've developed. I had a conversation, I had a message from a guy I began to prospect on LinkedIn recently this week, and he said to me, the very first line of his message to me was, I know mentorship at the level that we're talking about comes with a cost, but before I get into that, can I just explain my background? Now, I'm not selling mentorship. That's not what I do. But what I am doing is putting out the things that help people to shift their mindset from a personal perspective. So I'm coming back full circle to this and the winner's image. What I'm talking about are the fundamentals of the way your mind works, or rather you as an entity work, based on the consequences of the way you're thinking and the way you have been thinking. Because what you're beginning to think now may not be related to what you used to think. And this is where the change begins. So let me talk about this. So your self-image, Maxwell Maltz, for those of you who don't know who he is, he's the author of a book called Psycho-Cybernetics. It's essentially one of the seminal works on how to shift your subconscious and the processes involved in making that happen. And the work he did in researching that essentially is it's the seminal work on habit formation. Everything that comes now into focus on how you create new habits and get rid of old ones. Actually, you never get rid of an old habit. You just overwrite it. It's still there, it will always be there, but you just overwrite the programming in a way which means it's a different behavior. But he said this, he said self-image is a premise. In other words, it's a concept, it's an idea. And it's based off a foundation upon which pretty much you are who you are, your entire personality, your behavior, and of course, even your circumstances, because you place yourself in ways which create your circumstances. Your circumstances are built. So everything we have in our lives is down to us. Because it's an expression of who we are. I mean, the external world is an expression of our inner world. So if you're not happy with your environment and what you're having it, you've got to change your inner world before you change your external world. It's that way around, it's not the other way around. Unless, of course, you happen to be fortunate enough to win the 140 million on the Euro Millions last week, or whenever the last one was. I don't know. I can't play it while I'm here. So
you're really sad because I didn't even know that's how much was in there.
No, I don't know. I'm theoretically, I'm saying that, 140 millions. I'm just by way of a complete aside in this sense. I don't buy a ticket unless it's over 100 million. So, I'm not cheap in the sense that you get my point. It's just because I see buying the ticket as just a flutter. It's a fantasy in itself. So in that sense, I'm not expecting it. And that's probably why I've never won it. But there we are. So what I'm driving at here is whatever's going on internally is what comes is what reflects externally. And this is where the challenge lies for everyone. Now, I've kind of melded this with what's going on with Enzino, because who you are from a core belief point of view, you've built up over time. So let's just get into that for a second. Talk about the existing kind of combination of things about self-image. Are you keeping on time? So no idea how much time I take.
Yeah. It's
Oh.
minutes past.
So it's so self-image. It's the mental picture we have of ourselves. It encompasses everything. Where we're strong, what our weaknesses are, and of course, what our capabilities are. Oh, I could do that. Oh, I couldn't do that. I could jump off the top board at a diving pool. There was a time when I could dive off it, but I wouldn't choose to do that now. So I have a capability to do it, but I don't choose to do it. So it's not something I see as defining from my point of view. One thing I've said, and I've said this many times, so you all heard it before, I'm not a dancer. I kind of, I've got 2 left feet and I jog around uncontrollably when I've had enough wine. It's that sort of thing for me. And I'm not very entertaining. So that's not a strength from my point of view, or I don't see it as a strength. Where I see strengths in me are I'm a good communicator. That's what at least I like to think I am. But equally I have weaknesses and capabilities, and all of them are within what I've decided about myself, whether I know I've made the decision or not. That's who I've become. So what you perceive as me is a reflection of what I'm thinking internally and what I do internally. And of course, all of this acts as a self-fulfilling prophecy, because it influences our thoughts, the decisions we make, and of course, ultimately our achievement. So if you see yourself as a president in Enzino and you see that picture well enough, guess where you're going? Because that's who you're defining yourself. You may not have the capabilities in all departments at this stage, but if your willingness is there and your vision is there, your determination is there, your definiteness of purpose, as Napoleon Hill says, then that's where you're going. It becomes inevitable because you build in place, you put in place all the things that make it happen. So the positive self-image fosters the confidence, the resilience, and of course the courage to pursue the goals. It does one other thing. I don't think I did put it. The opposite, as a negative self-image, can limit your potential, leading to self-doubt and missed opportunity. So remember this: there are three basic states when it comes to action. You move towards something, you move away from it, or you do absolutely nothing. Fight, flight, and freeze. 3 basic emotional states. And that word is key because it is always emotionally driven. If you fear something too much, you don't do it. If you conjure up the thought that it's frightening, you won't do it. Take myself, give you another example. I talked about jumping off a high board. Well, the first time I ever did that was when I was about 11. And I used to go to, Sue knows, we used to go
The
to
blue pool.
the blue pool in Camberley. They've now built an estate on it. It was an open air swimming pool, bloody freezing from April through until September. And I taught myself to swim at the age of 11. And I used to go to the blue pool and meet up with a bunch of mates, that kind of thing. And I probably took me about 5 or 6 weeks of the season to actually pluck up the courage to go off the top board. And it wasn't very high. It was like a 3-meter board. It wasn't, blimey. It's jumped downhill more than that. But I couldn't jump off the board into water. That was the bizarre thing. And I'd go up to the top board and I'd stand around on there. It's a little group of people who used to stand there. And then people would be diving off and jumping off and, blah, blah. I'm thinking, I want to do that. I want to do that. And then I'd walk back down. It took me 5 weeks to pluck up the courage to actually do it. And I don't know whether you've ever seen someone who's not really that confident when they're coming off a relatively high board. They kind of just do a step off it. And there's one leg about 5 or 6 inches below the board, and then the other one follows. And they don't want to do it, but they're doing it for some reason. So, but it's having the courage to do that. And then, of course, once I've cracked that problem, I want to do it again. Like being a small child, that thrill of entertainment and excitement. And then, of course, you start to show off. Because that's what, you get good at it, or you don't necessarily get good at it. You think you're good at it. So what I'm saying here is that both sides of it are the same, are opposites. A negative self-image limits the potential, leading to self-doubt and missed opportunities. So, and those things like, am I good enough? I'm not worthy, and all that kind of core value stuff that we have sets the landscape within which we either exceed or succeed, exceed our expectations, or don't. Whether we even take part. And of course, the foundation of all this are your core beliefs. Now, they are learned. You come into this world with certain neural pathways that get built upon as you experience things. Your environment matters as a child. The hardwiring happens in the first, well, it's not permanently hard, but the core wiring, the personality core, gets built within the first 7 years of life. Massive amounts of research done in this. And the change of that is more difficult the older you get. Because the wiring gets harder as we get older. So shifting thinking is a process, never an event. So first of all, these are the fundamental truths that you hold about yourself and your world. This is who you are. This is who I am. Well, you may not know who you are. I have to say personally, I spent many, many years not really knowing who I am. There are lots of people who'd be prepared to tell me though, from their perception of who I am, but it's whether it resonates. And this is one of the reasons I got out of corporate, because I couldn't square what I was fundamentally in my heart with what the values of the business were. And it made me realize that a very long time ago, but the day that our daughter was born, after 36 hours of exhausting labor on Sue's part and my fretting, there was this amazing little bundle. And I walked into the job I hated. Well, actually, no, I didn't. I came back the following day after Sue had kind of recovered a little bit. And I said, do you mind if I resign from my job? And she said,
Calling someone, getting a girl when she's out of action.
yeah, I caught her in a weak moment. And she said, yeah, it was quite an interesting reply, really, because she didn't argue with me. She just said, do I have a choice? Which is very brave. And I said, well, not really, no. So I resigned from that job, and it was very well paid. And but I hated the people I worked with, or correction, not them personally. I just hated the environment in which I was working, because I thought there was something better. And I started my own business and went bust very quickly. So I went, oops. So let's come on to limiting examples, just a few. You can list these for yourself. The things you think of as being weak about yourself. And I'm not going to try and identify any of this in anybody other than myself. I'm not good enough. I'm too old to start something new. I'm not a natural salesperson. What will people think of me? A lot of us spend a lot of time putting too much weight on the very last one of these. What will people think of me? When someone says, this is how, I'll come on to this in a minute, but when someone says to you, oh, you haven't got into one of those pyramid schemes, have you? You can say, yeah, it's the best thing I've ever done. Or what do you mean? Why? What do you know? How confident are you in what you're doing? It's a question of reflection, isn't it? In terms of whether this is a core belief, or it's a weak one or it's a strong one. And understanding them helps you to understand who you are and where you are and what is holding you back. I've spent massive amounts of time on this personally in recent times, because I did a bit of shadow work, which exposed elements of me that I didn't like. I don't like. Then they're still there. They're just not what they were. But empowering examples of core values and foundational core beliefs, particularly, I am worthy. And why wouldn't you be? Why wouldn't you be? I'm worthy of success. My life experience is the greatest asset I've got. It is. And I'm a person of value who helps others. We do. If we're working with Zeno, we have the capacity for it anyway. And of course, I'm capable of learning and mastering new skills. Of course you are. Everybody is. It's a question of whether you're excited enough, whether you're willing to do it and you want to do it. So let me move on. Just produce this image about where we are with our core value. Some of you will have seen this before. This is the core of our beliefs. the bit that's hard is why, and the bit that's subject to the external influences we've had, and the influence and the beliefs we've created for ourselves based upon what we think. And of course, what you have is what you focus on. So your core beliefs are driving a negative environment and a negative focus. Oh, that won't work. I can't be bothered. Oh, that definitely won't work. And someone else is looking at the same thing and saying, that's going to work. Who's right? Well, in your world, you are. In their world, they are. It's like the two shoe salesmen going to Africa. And one writes back and says, there's no market here. Nobody wears shoes. The other writes back and says, this is the best place I've ever been. No one wears shoes. Who's right? Well, they're both right. It's a question of your perception, isn't it? What you focus on. So what you say to yourself is also incredibly important and influential, because that talks you into what you are, keeps you where you are, because it argues against the idea of the change, because humans aren't good at change. So your self-talk is also important. What are you saying to yourself every day? And of course, that all drives your actions and your habits. And they are self-fulfilling based on your focus and your self-talk. You get out what you're thinking about. What you think you can achieve is what you work towards achieving. Your habits create the same activity that generates the results you expect. Self-fulfilling. And the other thing is, it's about people and the external influences you've got. Are they reinforcing it? Because if they're reinforcing where you are, that's where you will remain. That's why one of the key things is to change your peer group. You're wanting change and you're not getting change. You're referring it to people you know really well who are giving you their opinions. Like our old upline used to say, opinions are like belly buttons. Everyone's got one and they serve no useful purpose. Well, if we were surrounding our friend with the people that we give weight to their opinion about, and they're keeping you where you are, that's to protect them. It's not to protect you, because you're responsible for who you are, and that's also a big barrier to change. This is how people stay what's stuck. It's a hard place to be. So we have to translate the core beliefs into beliefs about Zinzino and the market we work in. So for a lot of people, this is the problem, because they come in with core beliefs that may be slightly negative anyway, about their own self-worth, their worthiness, especially if they've been caught in that midlife trap, and the trap is keeping them where they are anyway. Then they're bringing that mindset into a Zinzino environment, which is all about growth and perspective and change, and they're putting it through that filter. And the filter is keeping them where they are, despite the fact the opportunity is available. And what's the opportunity built on? Well, it's built on the results that Zinzino creates, essentially. And of course, you've got to have beliefs that build a thriving Zinzino business. They're empowering core beliefs. So there's, first of all, a belief in our industry and understanding what it is that Zinzino is involved in. So if you've got a negative perspective of Zinzino, the network marketing model, which isn't any of the things we're listing here, then there's a problem. And of course, there's the belief in the company and the product. So if any of these are saying, if any of you've got doubts about any of these, doesn't matter what your core values are, these are going to be built on where your belief is right now. That's where the inactivity comes from. Last one is belief in your own success. So if the first two are weak, the last one doesn't matter, because you won't do what you don't want to do. I will build a presidential business. Every single one of you on this call can do that. What do? Invite, present, follow up. Well, we promote the next event, we work on ourselves, particularly that we work on ourselves. Maybe the first one should be we work on ourselves. Because if you believe in your own success, the only thing that's going to happen is you will be. Because you'll do the work that's needed, because it's worth doing. Because the biggest thing that holds people back is the value they place upon the activity. Oh, I can't do that, I can't talk to him. what's holding you back. So let's talk about the mechanism. So some of you will have seen this concept before. This is called the stick man. And it's a graphic representation of you. And when you see a child draw a picture of a person, the head's always bigger than the body. So you get these huge heads and these tiny little bodies, generally speaking. That's general. But what we have to understand is the division between our conscious and our subconscious. That's what the line in the middle actually represents. We all think we drive our own bus. We don't. The bus is driven from the subconscious, because that's where all your habits and the programming is. That's the bit that gets built as a core in your first 7 years. That's the bit that's not hardwired, but hardish wired. It's changeable, but you've got to work on that change. So whatever you do in terms of who you are at the moment and your thinking and what we talked about in terms of staying where you are, that I'm going to call that your X-type personality. You are currently you're an X-type personality because you've got X-type thinking. And your subconscious is geared towards delivering the results for an X-type personality, which is what happens in terms of the work you do, which is that little one at the bottom, which is where your body is. So what you do physically relates to everything else. So there's a body in harmony, a mind and a body in harmony. It may not be in harmony. And a lot of the time people aren't in harmony at all. And actually, when we come on to the next slide in a second, we'll talk about the difference. But this is essentially the way this drives conscious to subconscious and the results that you get. So if you're getting inconsistent results, you're getting there's stuff to be worked on. So here we are again, and you're starting with a new idea. You've got a Y-type idea. Now you can't deliver Y-type results until you change your X-type thinking and your X-type programming, your X-type habits. Because X-type results will continue, even though you're thinking a Y-type idea. So let me bring back to president, because that's the Y-type idea. Create a Y-type, I'm going to go president. I want to go president. President, that sounds like a good place to be. I can get a couple of 100,000 shares and pick up about 50K a month. That's a nice number. I could live on that. That's good. Yeah, let's do that. Why don't we do that?
Okay.
Don't you think that's a good thought? Oh, I know what. No, I won't bother doing that. I'll buy a lottery ticket. Same result, different way to get there. One's based entirely upon chance, the other isn't. So here we are with a Y-type idea, but X-type programming, and of course the conscious and subconscious, and it's still producing X-type results. So now we have to keep working on that Y-type idea because we're going to create new possibilities. This has to become acceptable. You see, there's a divide. That divide is really solid. You have to blur that line. You've got to drive the Y-type idea into the X-type personality. But right now, it's still not strong enough. We haven't created enough of a vision for ourselves. This is what's happened to Stuart in the last 5 years. I remember the first Zeno convention we went to in Stockholm, not 2019 or 2020, I can't remember which one it was, whichever one it was. Stuart and I were sat next to each other in the audience. Orion was doing his keynote speech, and he got one of those speeches out where he decided he was going to stand on a chair and jump up and down. And he got all animated, and he was getting everybody in the audience to stand on the chair. So we were all standing on chairs. Stuart was sat on his backside on the chair next to me. I said, "Come on, Stuart," and I tried to pull him up. You know, this is a chair standing moment, so I'm not doing that. And he'd be happy for me to relay this tale because that's not him now. So over that interval of time, he's changed his thinking. He's driven the Y-type idea into his consciousness in a way, which has then turned it into a physical one. But until that happens, the results simply remain the same. This is an area of deep problem for most people because there's a disconnect between what they're thinking they want, what they're thinking they're doing, and actually the results they're getting. That leads to frustration, big frustration. And it's no different. It could be completely outside the Zinzino environment. It could be any walk of life in any other set of circumstances. This is where the big problems lie, where someone has Y-type thinking, but X-type results and X-type programming, which is too hard for them to change because they don't know the way to do it. And they're not motivated strongly enough to make it happen. So how do you get new results? Well, it's quite simple. You create the Y-type program. Because the Y-type programming becomes Y-type result. Y-type result. This is the movement of personality. Your subconscious shift only happens when it starts to decide that this set of habits it's now creating are in tune with the core value. So it's a process, it's not an event. You don't make your mind up one morning and go, I'm going to become I'm a president now. Well, you can conceptually make that decision, but you've still got to drive the habits. Talk to anybody who's achieved any great success in their life. It's always been driven by changing action, driven by new belief and new subconscious programming. Because it can't happen otherwise. It simply don't happen. So it's thought, feeling, action. Thought, feeling, action. Conscious, subconscious results. That's the way it works. So for all of us to want to get to that position of the fantasy image we created for ourselves in a real world sense, we have to change our thinking from X to Y. Conceptually. And that delivers pretty much anything you want. Because you choose, you can choose. So we put this in a Zinzino context. What Stuart's done is he shifted his thinking in a way, and what's made it so powerful, he came at it from a personal perspective about how it's actually affected him and what he's delivering as a consequence of it. And that shift is something we all, when we make, the results come very, very quickly. Because your new behaviors start to deliver a different view that others have of you as much as anything else. There's a different energy, there's a different sense of purpose, there's different attitude as well. You know, you look at Marco's attitude in this, he says, I don't need these people, they need me. He's not selling anything to these people, he's exposing the potential. He's looking at it from the point of view of an alignment. He's not looking to flog them a bottle of balance oil. He's looking to flog them a lifestyle change that's going to deliver on results that they'd like to have for themselves. That's not for everyone. We know that. We all know that. So what's our job? Invite. It's a sieving process. We sieve people to find out whether their attitude is sufficiently open for them to begin to make it. Very simple concept. What do you need to change in order to change your results? That's going to be habit driven. It's going to be driven by a feeling, and the feeling to do something or not to do something. Focus on that area first. Whatever it is you're reluctant to do, it's probably the thing that needs to change first. I hope that's been helpful. I'll stop sharing.